Hello and welcome to our podcast series, Conversations with KidsPeace. I'm Bob Martin. We're recording this episode as August has come and we start to realize summer's end is upon us. And for me, that brings up the memory of the best television commercial I ever saw. You know the one. For the office supply company, with the chortling father gleefully tossing school supplies into his shopping cart in front of his stone-faced children. All to the strains of that holiday classic, It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year. Well, no matter how you feel about it, it is back to school time, and we thought we'd take a look at how families and parents can help their kids get ready for success in school this fall. And spoiler alert, it's not taunting them with school supplies. With us to discuss this are Adrienne Pauling, Site Supervisor of the Acute Partial Program on KidsPeace's Broadway campus in Fountain Hill, PA. Adrienne, welcome.
Thank you.
And Michelle Callahan, who is Site Supervisor at KidsPeace's office in Tobyhanna, PA. Welcome.
Thanks, Bob.
All right. Let me begin. I think as a parent, I can remember being excited about the kids going back to school, realizing the kids may not have been that excited about it. Adrienne, let me start with you. What are some common stresses that parents should and could see their kids dealing with from an emotional perspective at this time of year with this transition?
So I think you nailed it with the word transition, and that's what it is. As adults, as children, everyone going into a new period of time, a change when you've had 3 months off, going swimming, going on vacations, and now it's kind of like we have to go into a structured setting. So be mindful of that as a parent, that think of the transitions that you might have some difficulty with and be mindful that that's what these kids are going through at this time. You may see a bunch of things. Kids are worried about not knowing their teachers. They're worried about what classroom they're going to be in. They're worried about being able to perform academically, possibly going to a new school, changing grades, all that good stuff. So that could manifest itself in a variety of ways. Kids could be overly emotional. Kids could be whiny. Kids could be defiant. Kids could be disrespectful. And all of that really could come from their anxiety related to this transition back to school and changing their routines.
Michelle, what do you think? Is there something that should be looked for specifically?
I mean, I think, with kids, you see a lot of the surface level stuff of more like the defiance, anger, refusal, avoidance. But I think, like Adrienne was saying, a lot of times it's more the underlying stuff, and it may look more like a sadness, isolating, crying, and those are some other things to kind of look for, and I think needs to be normalized to some degree.
Right.
Just like she said, transitions are hard.
Right. Let's talk specifically, and we were talking before we started recording about specific concerns or issues to take into account with kids who may be, say, going to school for the first time, the little ones.
Yeah, those poor little kindergartners. It's hard for them. And some of them have had the luxury of going to preschool and maybe have had like a half a day and kind of understand what that dynamic may be like, but some of them have not. And I think what we see a lot with them is more the separation anxiety. And I think that manifests very similar to kind of how like Adrienne was saying. A lot of crying. They might be using those guilt statements like, you don't love me anymore, you don't want me anymore. And that could be really hard for someone like a parent to hear.
Yeah. I have to tell a quick story. When my older son started to go to school in first grade, I was having the anxiety. And I said to my wife, maybe we should take him. Maybe you shouldn't put him on the bus. And she looked at me like I had three heads and said, he's looking forward to that bus ride more than anything else. He's so excited about getting on the bus. There's an element of the parents having to make sure that they're modeling and communicating the right emotional state, right?
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there. If you take your child to school and you are walking them into the kindergarten classroom for the first time and you're tearful and you're going back for the extra hug, that says to kids that it's not safe here or something is going on, because kids ultimately translate crying as something they're afraid of something or they're being hurt. So when they see their parent crying, they're thinking, well, they're leaving me here, so why are they crying? What's the concern?
What am I missing here?
Yeah. And I get it. It's emotional, and kids aren't able to think like, oh, this is a milestone for me. That's why mom's crying, So I would encourage parents to be as encouraging and supportive, taking them into that classroom, and then by all means go to your car and have that moment where you melt down and you think of every diaper you've changed and, all those sorts of things.
And I think there's also an assumption that, sometimes the kids are going to be the one that struggles the most, and that's not necessarily the case.
Some of them are ready to go.
Right.
Find your other person that can support you, hold it together for the kid, because they feed off of our emotions. Absolutely.
Now Adrienne, let's talk about the other side of it. We talked about the little kids going to school for the first time, but we'd also have transitions within the secondary school, the elementary school. You go from elementary to middle school, go to middle school to high school. Are there specific stresses there that we kind of need to be aware of?
Well, I think a big one is being, in a new place, and essentially we talked about this earlier, being low man on the pole. So if you go from, a middle school setting into high school, and then there's 3 grades above you, whereas last year, you went on the 8th grade field trip and you went to the 8th grade dance and, you were the big man on campus, and now you're starting over. And I think it's important for parents to remind their kids of previous successes. Like, hey, remember when you went into middle school and you were afraid because you were a 6th grader and the big 8th graders were going to be on the bus and in the classroom. And you know what you did? You made it through, and you're doing great. So I think reminding them of previous successes and just encouraging them, things are going to be a little uncomfortable, but that's a part of life, and you'll get through it, and we'll work through it, and we'll figure it out.
And we have to remember, kids are so resilient. They're so flexible. Yes. They might be in a bad place that first day, and then it's the best thing in the world the second day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time.
Let's talk a little bit specifically, because we're going to have some stuff on our blog about tips that parents can look at in terms of making sure that the back-to-school time is as set for success as possible. Michelle, what are some of those tips that we want to relay to those parents?
I think the biggest thing is the routine, because when we're in summer, a lot of kids, their bedtimes aren't the same. They're up longer hours. I think it's good maybe a couple of weeks before they're going back to school to kind of try and get that the routine back to normal. So going to bed at a normal time, making sure they're getting their 8 hours of sleep, eating a balanced diet, like making sure they're ready to go at school, getting their supplies ready. Don't, wait to the last minute to try and, get all those things together. And I think another big thing that we see is these kids on the screen time, as we would call it. I mean, the computers, the video games, the cell phones. I mean, they're not going outside like they used to. So I think, in the summer, they're spending a lot more time on the screen time. And I think that's another thing they really need to cut back before they go back to school, because I think that might be part of that school refusal and avoidance that we see sometimes.
And Adrienne, there is that point, as Michelle just said, about setting the routine, but also making them, and you alluded to this, it is an important thing, and they should pay attention to it, and they should kind of embrace the change.
Right. I think that we should encourage kids to embrace the change, but at the same time, another tip would be to stay sympathetic and empathetic with them, that this stuff is tough. I mean, I would not go back to middle school if you paid me, Bob. I just wouldn't.
Ain't that the truth?
And there's things that they're going to say, oh, I don't have any friends, or what if, I don't find anybody to sit with at lunch. And to us as adults, sometimes we minimize that and say, oh, come on, there's going to be a seat. You'll just sit somewhere. But to really get on their level and think about what it was like to be in their situation and be fearful of not having anyone to sit with at lunch, you know?
Right. And that, it sounds like that's also something that would maybe uncover some other issues. And I'm wondering, like, once the child has gone into school, like, are there signs that parents should be looking for to make sure to see if the transition and the school is going well, or maybe not very, kind of going poorly? What are some things they could look for?
Well, I think first, to kind of prepare for that, one of our tips that we talked about was staying active in their school life. Know your kid's guidance counselor. Take advantage of those apps and computer programs and websites that schools have now, where you can literally follow your kid around all day. You know what grades, you know what assignments they've turned in. I talk with parents all the time there's a text messaging app that they can text the teacher during the day and say, hey, how's it going? So I think a really big, important part of it is to just be active in their school life, attend the meetings, know their passwords and those sorts of things in their life with their electronics, because that's ultimately where you're going to find what's going on if something bad is going on.
And they will try to do that instead of homework every time when they can.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think just, creating that safe place for them to come home and actually just check in on how their day actually went too. Not just going off of apps and stuff, sitting down with your kid and saying, hey, how was your day? Tell me the highs, tell me the lows.
I used to try to do that. I just said, I want you to tell me 3 things that were really unusual today and what happened to you. And after a while, they started doing it. It was hard at the beginning, but they were really starting to, basically say, here's what I'm going through, and here's what's happening, and this is the kind of stuff that a parent wants to know. But I think to your point, Adrienne, you also don't want to say, well, here's how you fix that. Here's how you do it. You say, I understand, I get what you're saying. Maybe you should consider some things that you can do that would be helpful in those situations.
And I think it creates a norm to have now an open dialogue where maybe you as the parent don't have to keep asking how their day was. Hopefully your kid will eventually come home and just start telling you how things are going, because you've created that safe and supportive environment for them to do that at home.
Let me ask a question that I think came up. Again, I'm doing a lot of this from my own experience as a parent, but I remember a lot of parents being concerned about developmental progress of the child, especially if they're going through one of those transition times into a new school. That if it seems like the peer group is advancing maybe faster than your child, what can you say to the parent to say, I guess the answer is, keep calm.
Right. There could be a variety of things that are going on in that type of situation. I mean, first and foremost, we are big proponents of kids being involved. So make sure that their social lives, their academic lives, and their family lives are balanced. So maybe your child just needs to join karate or join a team sport, and that will help them, socialize more and be on the same level as their peers. The other thing is, it could be something like a learning disorder, and your child could, I'm sorry, I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, organically have something going on that, needs to be assessed. And then that's where you stay active with the guidance counselors and the teachers. You find out, are they distracted in class? Are they, not performing up to a certain standard? And then, you take it to that point. So don't jump to conclusions and don't, assume the worst.
And there's lots of resources.
Absolutely.
In most schools,
Absolutely.
most school districts can help you with that.
And I was going to say, the guidance counselor is a good person in a situation because they kind of understand the academic part of it, but they also have a background in counseling and kind of understanding, to really weed out, is this really a learning disorder? Is it something else? Because you had mentioned the resources, a lot of parents don't know that they have the right to request, additional services or testing, from a school psychologist. They have the 504 plans and they have the individualized educational plans.
The IEPs. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So, sometimes that's not necessary for kids, and I think it's hard for a parent to gauge. Sometimes they may be almost, no, my kid doesn't have a problem. It's kind of like a denial, they don't want their kid to be labeled, and which is completely understandable. And then you have the other end of that too. Don't, discount that there may be something else going on, and get your kid the extra help that they may need, or at least the testing to figure out if they need that help.
It sounds like a lot of it does come down to, you have a chance now as you get ready and everybody's sort of focused on it to set some good communication patterns and good communication habits. Would you say that's probably fundamental to what you need to do to make this happen well for them? Absolutely.
And if parents aren't communicating, it's not, the kids aren't going to be the ones that initiate that. So, the kids aren't going to be the ones following you into the kitchen saying, Mom, let's talk about your day. It's got to be, parents have to, initiate it and show a general interest. And then, you talked before about signs maybe to pick up on if something is going wrong. If you notice that your kid is coming home from school, going right to their bedroom, doing their homework and going to sleep. Increased sleep, that's a big one for depression. Increased anger, if they seem more irritable, or if they seem, every little thing bothers them, or they're snapping out at you verbally, those types of things. Those are the things you want to look at. And while some of those can just be a part of, again, the transition and the increased, academic demands and the increased stress, it could also be a sign that there's something else going on. Maybe they're being bullied. Maybe, they are having some type of depression or anxiety issues. And then maybe, you do need to get that assessed.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's important not to assume that it's an academic issue, even though that's how we kind of see that first, right, with the grade slipping. And again, the guidance counselor could be a person to kind of gauge, is this someone who may need to be evaluated even for ongoing therapy services to support them emotionally?
And that brings us to something we want to mention. In both of your offices, you offer something that I think a lot of people don't quite realize and don't understand how valuable it could be. These the walk-in assessments.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, all 4 of our outpatient sites, we have 3 in the Lehigh Valley and 1 in the Poconos. We offer free walk-ins Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It's 15, 30 minutes. We do an assessment on the kid, and we kind of help understand, do they need ongoing services? But it's not just that. Sometimes they may need a certain level of care. So outpatient may not be the right setting for them. Sometimes we make referrals to the partial program. And sometimes if there's safety issues that are severe enough, we may recommend that they be hospitalized. And those are all things that we can assess and kind of help with that process and refer within KidsPeace, because we have different levels of care. And it's just good, for a parent sometimes to just get an extra set of eyes, an extra, set of opinion from someone who's trained. We see walk-ins constantly throughout the school year, but especially when they first go back to school, because it is such a hard transition for them.
Absolutely.
So it's a great resource, and I encourage parents to use it. We have good relationships with the school districts, and they know to send kids over to us. So
think of that.
Yeah, use the resource.
Again, communication, empathy, knowing that there's resources, and respecting that this is a transition and you need to be supportive, I think is really the bottom line here, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And take the school's lead. I mean, sometimes something you may see as an issue or you may be concerned about is not really something to worry about. These are kids. They all develop at different rates. They all have different things going on socially, academically, all that stuff. So just, I don't know.
Just go along with it and kind of trust your instincts.
Right.
But also recognize that there are resources available if you really have those concerns.
Absolutely.
And just that, I really think that, praising is huge too, because I think sometimes we get stuck with we expect our kids to do certain things, but it always feels good, whether you're a kid or an adult, to have someone acknowledge your successes and say, good job doing that, thanks for doing that, on just remaining, positive and, talking about their strengths and helping them use those strengths to overcome some of the obstacles that they're having in the school setting.
Right. Well, first of all, I'll give you both praise. This is fantastic.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
You know that we end each of our podcasts with asking our guests for a life hack. Now, this can be a favorite saying or a quote. It could be a tip on how to do something around the house better. It might just be some inspiration you found that helps you get through maybe those difficult days. So, Adrienne, I'm going to start with you. What's your life hack today?
So my life hack is my favorite quote, and it is that attitude is a choice. And that's how I operate on a daily basis. It's what I encourage my employees to operate on. And I think we live in a time where, we deal with a lot of nonsense and people are angry. And if you think about it, they're choosing, in a sense, to have that attitude about their day, their life, their week, their month. So I think that if we become less reactive to other people and understand that the way we react is our choice, the way we behave, the way we feel about, daily trials and tribulations, that it might be a happier world to live in.
That's a hard act to follow,
yeah,
Michelle, but you got to do it. What's your life hack?
And I actually downloaded an app on my phone, and it gives me an inspirational or motivational quote every day. So I actually got this one from there. And I think, part of success is all in how you think about things. So the first one, I have 2 of them, is failure is the condiment that gives success its flavor. And I think about, like when with electricity and phones, right? Like how many times did those guys have to fail or feel like they failed until they finally got it? And I think sometimes we get discouraged so easily. And if we just don't give up, sometimes we can really reach that goal or reach that level of success.
It's funny. I remember the story. It's probably apocryphal, but there's a story that Thomas Edison was asked sometimes, well, how did you feel when you failed in your first attempts to get the filament for the incandescent light bulb? He said, I want to correct you. I didn't fail. I succeeded in finding 99 things that didn't work.
Yep, I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, and he was brilliant enough to stick with it.
Right.
That's right.
And I think that's an important part of it. whether you're an adult or kid.
Right.
And I have one more, just because
Sure.
I like this one a lot too. It's you don't have a right to the cards you believe you should have been dealt. You have an obligation to play the heck out of the ones you're holding. So I think sometimes we get so caught up in what we want things to be, and we really need to focus on what we have and making the best of what we have.
And that's one of those lessons I think that the kids need to know when they get into the school, so it all turns back. Guys, thank you so much. Michelle Callahan is site supervisor at KidsPeace's offices up in Tobyhanna in the Poconos in PA, and Adrienne Pauling, site supervisor of the acute partial program on KidsPeace's Broadway campus, which is in Fountain Hill, Pennsylvania. Again, thank you so much for coming. I hope you'll come back. There's a lot of things that we'd love to talk to you about. Let me end with a couple notes this time around. If you have any comments or suggestions about our podcast, we would love the feedback. So you can go to kidspeace.org, click on the Contact Us link at the top of the page, and that'll help you share your thoughts with us. If you're getting this podcast anywhere but YouTube, we should tell you that on our YouTube channel, we are now putting up a video version of this discussion. So if you're thirsting to see what I look like, and I really don't know why you'd want to, but we're there.
Don't
if
be
you
so
wanna,
hard on yourself.
Oh, thank you. See, you can come back anytime. We are there if you want to see us make the podcast magic happen. So there we go. Finally, if there are any school-age children listening to our podcast, I want to say that I'm sorry if by bringing up this unpleasant subject of summer ending that we've made you sad. But to be honest, I have to tell you, I really do believe this is the most wonderful time of the year, and especially for all of you. So from all of us at KidsPeace, good luck, be safe, and have fun at school this year. The Conversations podcast is produced by Robbie Allred. I'm Bob Martin. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to having you join us again for more Conversations with KidsPeace. Take care.